Tesla might take all the headlines when it comes to talking about electric cars, but actually in terms of sales volumes, it is this car, the Nissan Leaf, that is by far the market leader. It is the best-selling electric vehicle in the UK, in Europe and in the world. For that, you can partly thank the fact Nissan was among the first to the market with a fully electric car when it launched the original Leaf in 2010. This second generation model followed in 2017. This car is the Leaf E+. It's basically the next evolution of the second generation Leaf. Compared with the standard model, which continues on sale, this gets a bigger battery to give it a greater range and a more powerful electric motor so that it's quicker too. Not only that, but also compared with the standard Leaf, there's this blue tinge to the grille. Nissan really hasn't held anything back for this one. The powertrain upgrades include the fitment of a 62 kilowatt-hour battery to give the Leaf E+ a full to empty range on the WLTP cycle of 239 miles. The motor, meanwhile, produces 214 horsepower for a 0 to 62 mile per hour time of 6.9 seconds. So, on paper at least, this Leaf E+ has more than adequate performance and a range that is more than adequate for the majority of journeys undertaken by the majority of drivers. However, being a good EV isn't just about range and performance, it's about doing the things well that a normal car does well, such as having a big boot. As far as the bare numbers go, this is a good sized boot with more luggage capacity than a Volkswagen Golf. It's the detailed stuff that's not so good, like this high loading lip and the fact that folding the rear seats leaves a big step in the boot floor. Space in the back is pretty good actually. Headroom for me, I'm 5'11", it's just about okay. And legroom is good. My legs are sort of quite tucked in here, but there is enough legroom. If you want to get 3 in, you've got to straddle over here. It's going to throw my cameraman, he's going to have to move. Not really sure what this is. It's not a transmission tunnel. I assume it's some sort of battery cooling something or other. And the other thing to note is these seats here are fairly narrow. If you want to put a kid's car seat in and it has to be strapped in like that, it's quite hard to get it in these buckles. So something like a Qashqai is still more family friendly in that regard. What's more impressive is that despite the big gains in the battery capacity and energy density compared with the standard 40 kilowatt hour Leaf, the physical size of the battery pack is unchanged. The engineering ingenuity required to achieve a feat like that is extraordinary. In fact, it would seem like Nissan was so busy sorting out all the battery that it overlooked a couple of what you might consider essentials elsewhere. For example, the steering here adjusts for height, which is good, but it doesn't adjust for reach. And also, it's single zone climate control, it's not dual zone. Now, if this was a cheap family runabout, then I think that would be fine, but it's not. It's a mid-size family car, and not only that, because Nissan only sells the E+ in top spec Techno trim, it costs almost £37,000 once the government's plug-in car grant has been factored in. That's almost £37,000 for a car that doesn't even have reach adjustable steering. Thankfully, the rest of the interior layout has a quality feel to it, and the combination of an analog speedometer with digital trip computer allows the car to convey a good amount of information in an uncomplicated manner. Another big improvement is this new touchscreen. Now, this is a big step forward for Nissan, and not only because it includes Apple CarPlay and Android Auto as standard, but also because the display itself is much crisper than we are used to seeing from older Nissans. And also, the menu layout is very easy to follow, and the sat-nav mapping and everything else is good. A couple of other controls worth pointing out. First is this is the gear selector, although of course being an electric car there are actually no gears, it's just forwards or backwards. And there's this, the E pedal. Now, Nissan says when this is switched on, it ramps up the regenerative braking to such an extent that you actually don't need to touch the brake pedal itself for most of your driving. Instead, you just push the accelerator to go, lift off to stop. We'll come back to that in a minute. First, I want to talk about range. Now, on the WLTP economy cycle, that's kind of the standard measurement of fuel economy used these days, the Leaf E Plus does 239 miles. In the real world, it doesn't do 239 miles, not really, not at least if you're going to throw any motorway driving into the mix. And let's face it, if you're going to be doing around 200 miles in a day, then it is more than likely you will be using motorways at some point. And that is because the way electric cars, they're not at their most efficient at higher speeds. So when you're doing 60 to 70 miles an hour in this Leaf E+, you will find that the miles on the range decrease at a slightly faster rate than the miles on the odometer increase. I started one journey this week, for example, with 214 miles indicated on the range. That was just over 90% battery charge. I drove for 107 miles to my destination. I had the air conditioning on because it was a hot day. And the remaining range had dropped not to 107 miles, as you might expect, but to just over 80 miles. Now, obviously, with 80 or so miles left on the range, I had plenty of opportunity to go and find a charger, which I did. I found a rapid charger, I plugged in, and within half an hour or so, I'd added around 100 miles to the range, which was more than enough to get me home and plug in again. And that really is kind of the point of this E+. It means that if your daily driving is around 200 miles, for example, then you can do that and you can get back home and plug in again without having to charge in the interim. By comparison, a standard Leaf, which costs thousands of pounds less to buy, will manage around 130 miles from a full charge. And what about the extra performance of this E+ over a standard Leaf? Does that justify the higher price? Well, it's certainly, you know, it's pretty brisk when you put your foot down. It does accelerate quite quickly, but that doesn't make it a fun car on its own. It doesn't have any handling sparkle whatsoever, and because this driving position is fundamentally quite flawed, you don't really have any sense of connection with the car either. And what about the E-pedal? Still not sure, to be honest. There are times, particularly around town, when you think, oh yeah, this E-pedal's good, you know, I'm driving, I'm just using the one pedal, it's very relaxing, it's different. But then at other moments, like for example, if you're coming from a dual carriageway slowing down for a roundabout, when you think the E-pedal's got it, and then you get a bit closer and you think, oh, I'm not sure if it has got it, so you go to the brake, and then that doesn't do anything straight away until you push a bit harder, and then all of a sudden, you come to a very abrupt halt. It's just not quite as refined as I think it needs to be. Thankfully, you can, if you want, turn it off as easily as flicking a switch. So what do we make of the Leaf E+ then, unpredictable E-pedal and all? Well, I'm kind of halfway there, to be honest, which I suppose is another way of saying I'm not completely convinced. On the plus side, I think the packaging is decent, and if you're not worried about a sporty, involving drive, then it's certainly very quiet and smooth. However, to have any modern car with a flawed driving position, let alone one that costs this much, seems pretty unforgivable. And also, I think that Nissan's decision to only offer this in top spec Techno trim is a mistake, because it does make it so expensive, more expensive in fact than things like the Kia e-Niro and Hyundai Kona Electric, both of which incidentally can travel further on a single charge. I think that priced the way it is, this Leaf E+ is a case of close, but not quite close enough. What do you think of the Leaf E+ and of electric cars in general? Let us know in the comments below. Please also remember to subscribe and turn on notifications so you'll see when our new videos go live. And of course, be sure to head to cargurus.co.uk to find great deals from top-rated dealers when it comes to finding your next car.